A new Ethereum competitor believes that Ethereum is broken and they have the answers. I'm Rosemary Miller here with Stephen Ehrlich, the director for Forbes Digital Assets. Thank you so much for joining me today, Steve.
Hey, thanks, Rosemary. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, can you tell me about this new Ethereum competitor?
Yeah, absolutely. This was pretty interesting to learn about. The blockchain is called SWI, and its mainnet, basically, its public reveal, launched on May 3rd to quite a bit of fanfare. In the midst of this crypto winter, which has seen the price of Bitcoin still be down 58%, many Ethereum competitor tokens are down still more than that. Venture capital is drying up, and some of the tides are sort of going out when it comes to crypto. This company, this blockchain, launched with $300 million of VC backing, a $2 billion valuation, and I mean the backing of some major heavyweights. I mean Kevin O'Leary, Coinbase, Samsung, plenty of others. And what was most interesting to me about doing the story is that in this sort of like crypto bearish market where I think folks, developer activity users, are sort of moving away from some of these edge cases, these new blockchains uh, that sort of promise like the bigger, better, faster, more efficient, cheaper, etc. They're sort of moving back to Ethereum, or because Ethereum is pretty slow, it can only handle a handful of transactions per second. Some of the more prominent complementary blockchains to Ethereum, like Arbitrum and Optimism, and kind of staying on that ecosystem. And then here comes Evan Chang, who is the CEO of a company called Miston Labs, which is actually the founder of the SWI blockchain. And when the SWI blockchain went live, it handed over the keys to a foundation to make it more decentralized and I think avoid the ire of the SEC and securities regulators around the world. And when I spoke with him, I mean, he was much more willing to directly attack Ethereum and some of its shortcomings than plenty of other competitors that really just try to play nice with Ethereum because of the position that it has in crypto and the charisma and I guess just like uh, of its founder, Vitalik Buterin. Some of the quotes he gave me in the story were things like Ethereum is broken. He made a point of just highlighting how the programming language in particular that it uses, blockchains all are code. They're made up of code and smart contracts and programs that automatically execute. And this is very inside baseball, but the type of programming language that is used actually makes a big difference in how efficient it is to code, how many bugs might be introduced into a particular application. And Cheng kind of went on and on and on with me about why Ethereum and its new programming language called Solidity, which was created about 8 years ago, is just fundamentally flawed and not it really cannot be fixed. So he sort of took the approach when he was building SWI that you kind of have to throw out all of that, start from scratch, use a programming language that is much more efficient, and really try to do things right as opposed to sort of like building on top of what he saw as a cracked foundation.
So, does he actually believe that we could be the next Ethereum? I mean, there's one thing to tear something down, but there's another to actually, live up to the other's hype.
Yeah. No, that's a really great question, and the answer I think is yes and no to some extent. I mean, they are competitors in the sense that these are seen as multi-purpose blockchains. That means that they are able to run virtually any type of decentralized application, a decentralized competitor to Google or Facebook or Dropbox or Uber, what have you. By comparison, blockchains like Bitcoin are really meant as payments networks, and that's they're very rich in kind of what they do because security is paramount. SWI theoretically will be able to do all the things that Ethereum can do. However, the SWI blockchain has been designed specifically to appeal to gamers. That's a $200 billion industry that still kind of remains untapped and is seen as one of those white whales that crypto advocates really, I guess, pine for. One of the real, I think, innovations with regards to SWI is that it introduced something that was like object-based programming. Now, that may not mean a lot to many people, but just think about it. And this was an example that Cheng gave to me when I was interviewing him. Say you have a baseball. I'm a Philadelphia Phillies fan, and I find my favorite player on the street, I get him to autograph it. All of a sudden, that baseball is worth a lot more than the $4 that I paid for it at the store. Blockchains like Ethereum, at least right now, don't have an elegant way of updating that baseball, or let's call it an NFT in blockchain parlance, uh, to reflect those new characteristics. Basically, you have to do kind of a series of transactions that like jerry rig this. Whereas the new programming approach that Sui uses can do that almost automatically with just a quick single transaction. And if you go back to gaming, where if you level up, if you buy a new weapon, you do all these different types of things, you want that to be instantaneously reflected on the blockchain and with your character. And that's something that Sui in particular is really trying to promote, to take advantage of gamers, or to appeal to gamers. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're going to have to work hard to appeal to gamers because gamers, they don't appear to be that interested in blockchain technology fusing with the video game world.
So you're right. The history of blockchain and gaming has not always been a marriage made in heaven, and frankly, it hardly ever has been. For one, crypto and gamers got off to a pretty bad start because, especially during the heady days of 2021, when crypto was going through the roof and everybody was trying to mine Bitcoin and Ether. Back then, Ethereum was still a proof of work blockchain. Miners around the world were racing to buy what's known as GPUs, graphics processing units, which are used to, in particular, mine Ethereum back in the day, but they are sort of like the brains, the guts in computers that gamers use so that they can run their Fortnites and League of Legends and so on and so forth. And because of how much mining interest there was in buying these GPUs, the prices just went through the roof, which automatically kind of got them off the wrong foot when it came to gamers. Second, a lot of gamers, especially the ones that pay hundreds or thousands of dollars a year, they're not interested in doing this to make money. Most of them have jobs. They're in it for the fun, for the diversion, for the challenges, for some of the camaraderie, but they're not in it just to make money. And too many games, and one game that came up a lot in my reporting, Axie Infinity, sort of a battle play game, focused too much on the gamification, or excuse me, the financialization of gaming, known as GameFi. And again, that's like kind of antithetical to the gaming ethos. And one of the things that I know Sui and the team at Mistin is trying to do is find a way to make games that are appealing to play regardless of whether or not they are run off of Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or a blockchain. And that's really the challenge that they're trying to face. They're onboarding dozens of games from many gaming development studios that are Web 2 development studios that predate blockchain. But that's really going to be the challenge. And some of the gaming analysts that I spoke with are very skeptical that is actually going to be successful.
Well, Steve, you've been in this industry for quite some time, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of CEOs and founders come and go. I'm curious as to why you think Evan Ching and Sui were worth the story.
That's a good question, Rosemary. And the story was interesting for me to follow for a couple of reasons. One, again, the broader trend right now is sort of crypto is still receding, and much of the attention that remains is going towards Ethereum. And in particular, aside from just the idea that Ethereum is the largest blockchain by far, with the exception of Bitcoin, and it has a preponderance of developer activity, user activity, I think Ether and Ethereum also got a bit of a break when they were not mentioned. Ether was not mentioned in any of the recent SEC lawsuits that were launched against exchanges like Binance and Coinbase, despite the fact that the SEC chair Gary Gensler has kind of gone out of his way to avoid stating whether or not he believes Ether to be a security. So all of that is there. And then again, Chang, just by nature of his background too, was pretty fascinating to me. I mean, he grew up in Taiwan. He left the country when he was 16 to avoid compulsory military service. He joined his father in South Africa to help run a textile business. He applied and got into college in rural Ohio without even a high school diploma. I asked him if he said he tricked the admissions officials, I guess, in that school to letting him in. He said no, but he didn't really hide that he didn't have a degree. But he said they just probably did not look at his application close enough. Says he graduated with a dual degree, 4.0 GPA, and he called it very boring. He eventually ended up at Apple, where he worked with a couple of famed computer scientists and built a very famous open source tool that's sort of the backend for a lot of devices that we use today called LLVM, which kind of helps translate computer code into machine code so devices know what instructions to run. And then he got to Libra, which for those listening that kind of don't go back a couple of years in crypto, Libra was a very famous and maybe perhaps notorious failed project launched by Facebook and about a dozen other companies to try to create a blockchain-based decentralized currency scheme. And it just elicited so much regulatory backlash that it never got off the ground. He was actually the head of research for that program, and many of the other leaders at Miston Labs and Sui are all part of we're all part of Libra. So all of that background together, like trying to build something out of the ashes of what really was a failed project, despite the fact that one of the signature elements of Sui, the programming language called Move, was actually developed at Facebook. And it was open sourced at Facebook, which is why they're able to use it. So maybe there's also a bit of a redemption story in this as well, that at least one core component that the guts, the DNA of what was supposed to be Libra, perhaps it finds a new life in Sui.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Steve.
Great. Thanks, Rosemary.